experiences, your consistent opportunities for your teacher candidates to apply these skills in safe settings in the classrooms, your quality control gates, where you are using measures to monitor your teacher candidate development through the program, and also making sure through those quality control gates that your teacher candidates are demonstrating proficiency in high leverage indicators. Your calibration and data reliability has a system for monitoring reliability, which will be important through the implementation of this goal. You also have an annual certification and an evaluation tool for your evaluators of your teacher candidates. And last but never least, this is a significant strength in meeting at your program integrity of desired outcomes, because you are systematically measuring the integrity of your program to correlate to your desired outcomes. So thinking about how this information on fidelity can inform the program improvement efforts will be something that we'll be focusing on in our work over the next year, and starting with this first goal. Any comments on any of these items? First thing we need to start with when we're having conversations about these goals is we have to start with examining ourselves. Because the reality is that we absorb bias in the same way we breathe in smog, involuntarily and usually without any awareness of it. That's a very powerful, enlightening quote. Another quote is that even the most well-meaning educators come into the classroom with biases of some sort. Teachers and administrators are human. We aren't raised in a vacuum. So one thing that we need to think about here is how to be brave and how to be vulnerable and how to be transparent, and first examining ourselves as we go into this work about having more equity and diversity and inclusion and social justice. One of the resources that I want to share with you is through Unbound Ed Toolkit on disrupting inequity. Having brave conversations about bias. This is a good starting point for the leadership team, first of all, in introducing bias, in being able to strengthen group norms and ground rules. It comes with significant resources that could be used for case studies, looking at examples of microaggressions. These are things that we're all aware of that go on within faculty that are also things that we need to address through discussions in class sessions through our courses, as well as throughout our development and conversations that we have with our district partners and with our mentor developments that we have. The next section that they have on this, it could be thinking about in terms of alignment through coursework revision, could be historical perspectives about race in America. Thinking about how these things could be embedded through conversations, through coursework of content, and how that could be applied through clinical experiences. Another critical piece to look at is how does bias manifest in our schools? Questions that come to mind is understanding that lens with which we view others, being aware of the perspectives of the different shareholders that you have at Hansel University through your faculty, through your students, through your mentors, and through your partners. One of the things that's significant in starting these conversations is thinking about how you can bring about transformation in schools and establishing guidelines to help students to be able to discuss race openly. And this starts with being able to have these discussions with faculty as well. So there are some examples of group member agreements from courageous conversations about race. One of the things is to stay engaged, being able to, in these conversations, to be able to remain morally, intellectually, and socially involved in the dialogue, making sure that everyone is fully present, fully aware, and fully respectful in the conversations. Also, being aware of being ready to experience discomfort, because as part of the work of this process that's going to be so important for the university for affecting change in the program and also for the future educators that you're developing and for the educators that are already out in the field and continuing to strengthen the partnerships, is to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this is an area I think that takes some navigating and some very transparent conversations. Being able to have a safe place to just express your discomfort in having these conversations. The next one would be being able to speak your truth, being able to have these conversations about being honest about your thoughts and feelings. One of the precedences that have been set from having these conversations and using these group member agreements is being able to establish a protocol for a pause of respect when significant comments are made, when significant perspectives are brought up, to allow time for everyone to really process all of that and to be able to consider those different perspectives. One of the things that's also challenging is being able to accept non-disclosure. As someone that likes to be organized and to be able to plan things out and organize things, this is something that can really create a great deal of discomfort, because the reality is, at the end of these conversations, we can't always tie them up in nice, neat bows. These can be very challenging conversations. We might not have an answer to a solution, and we need to be able to learn how to hang out in uncertainty and to be cognizant not to rush to quick conclusions, especially when we're working with considerations for racial understanding. So being aware that this is going to be a cycle of conversation that's going to be going on as you're continuing to build your shared understanding, as you're continuing to build forward in your work for your program redesign. What I'd like to do is open this up for some conversation from you on these questions in terms of which of these guidelines for courageous conversations about race might you find to be most challenging for you, and why? I think that's an important conversation to start with the leadership team.
I'll start. I think that these are really important in a way, kind of norms and agreements. I might have a couple that I'd like to add if we're allowed to add them. But
absolutely.
I think out of these four, the accept non-closure is going to be a challenge for me. I've participated a little bit in different conversations that are uncomfortable, and I think sometimes you can feel like you have a really, a team who gets along really well, and then ultimately begin having conversations like this, and then you have disagreements or you're not on the same page, and so being able to kind of leave a meeting knowing that there might be a little bit of tension or could be a little bit awkward is very challenging for me.
So what strategies might you be able to use to address this? So I think this is beneficial for the team to consider these things, to start to build this self-awareness now of where these potential challenges could be and what could be the strategies to use to address this. And we can open up this for discussion for everyone. I've already shared this would be an area of challenge for me as well.
Yeah, I think I would recommend another norm around seeking first to understand. And the idea of listening, like being kind of a non-judgmental listener. And I think that would help going into that like mindset of allowing people to be vulnerable and opening that up with the opportunity that like we're also not judging. There's no judgment here. And so understanding that we might have to close up a meeting, but maybe one thing we might say is let's just maybe have some 1 or 2 minutes where we can kind of write down or maybe journal as we prepare for our next meeting, what would we like to see continue from this conversation? What questions do you have, or how are you currently wrestling maybe with some of the ideas that would allow us, I think, in the next meeting to kind of take start the meeting based on how we left it in the prior meeting.
I can think that would be a very effective strategy.
And then also when I'm looking at the group member agreements, we could probably even add something to that third bullet that says speak your truth, and maybe speak your truth and value the truth of others, because I think that might support us in being more open to the experiences of others and not being so quick to shut them down, but then also accept their experience. So that might be an additional agreement we add that might support our work moving forward.
Yeah, and I like that, Deidre, because I was going to say which one would be the most challenging for me would be the speak your truth. And not because not because it's, you're afraid to share your thoughts or anything like that. It's just as a team grows and more people come in, it's like you said, Sarah, we might all get along, right? But speaking your truth, sometimes if you're a little bit nervous to say something, you worry about jeopardizing those relationships that you've already built, or not knowing what others are thinking or knowing the truth of others. It's really intimidating to speak your truth sometimes. So I would like adding to that. And I think it goes along with what you said as well, Sarah, about really listen first, seek to understand what the other person is saying.
Notes on all these conversations to make sure that we continue this in the work moving forward, because you've added on some significant points for the norms that you see that would be valuable for you. And this is challenging work. This is hard work. So this is a really good start with a conversation. Next, I would just like to talk about what are some possibilities of what this might look like for Hansel University as you're starting to have these conversations with the faculty, as you're starting to plan out revising coursework, making changes with approaches and instruction and clinical experiences and partnerships. What might this potentially look like for Hansel University? And as we share through these resources, please feel free to share out any other ideas or questions that might come to mind. In terms of looking at coursework, there's been quite a bit of research that's gone on about ways in which coursework can be revised and implemented to make sure that we're developing the students' awareness of bias, discrimination, and social injustice. Ways throughout the coursework where we can be teaching about the history of poverty and classism, implementing ways throughout the curriculum, throughout the programs, using that anti-bias curriculum. And a very important piece of this is looking at what's going on within the communities, using what is around you, what is around the partnerships, what is of relevance for the needs of the students that you're serving, and engaging in problem-based learning to address those local issues. The next thing is there's quite a bit of fantastic free resources that are available for building an awareness amongst the faculty, and then through the clinical coursework and clinical application for culturally responsive pedagogy. So some examples of this are listed here. They're very comprehensive, and these modules come with resources that have a screencast that explain the content, but they also come with ready-made resources that can be immediately used by your teacher candidates, that they could be applying within the clinical classroom. They also come with coaching guides that are valuable for your teacher educators, your mentor teachers, to be able to use for coaching as well. Here's an example of one of the modules of working against racial bias, which would be a very good starting point, because in this module, you're really critically looking at and having conversations about sociocultural consciousness and explaining its importance, looking at all the considerations that go on with implicit bias, how can it impact teacher actions. And a significant piece is building an awareness of what the essential mindsets need to be that we have to consider within our program for our faculty and in our conversations with our partnerships. There's also other resources through Teaching Tolerance for critical practices for anti-bias education. This is a very comprehensive resource that goes in depth over building classroom culture in terms of working with partners on ways to engage in family and community. Very significant resources that could be of great value to the Hansel faculty for teacher leadership skills, because we not only want to develop teacher educators, we want to develop teacher leaders that affect change. And there's a very significant piece that goes along with this that really has application across the content areas as you're implementing coursework and curriculum. Social justice standards that work on identity, diversity, justice, and action. This is an example here for the teacher leadership section that comes with this resource for critical practices, is building, first of all, with that self-awareness and cultural competency, which would be a very good place to start with the leadership team, and then in branching out into conversations with the faculty. Strategies and mindsets and skills for learning how to speak up and respond when you come across examples of prejudice, bias, and stereotypes. Ways to build alliances in your partnerships. Ways to lead beyond the classroom, because we're not thinking of just about how to impact the students in the classroom, but also the communities around the schools in which we're serving. I want to open this up right here. Are there any questions or any ideas that come to mind with anything that you might already be working on within your leadership team, and anything that you might want to build on from these examples?
One question I had, Valerie, as I was just listening to you go through the resources that you're sharing with us, these are all resources. Did you say that we have access to, or these are resources that you're going to be supporting us with? Or
Yes. Thank you for that question for clarification. These are all free access resources, and I will be following up, following the meeting, sending you the links with all of those resources.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm curious about the building alliances. Do you know about that resources? Like, I'm curious about what it is.
I have not had a chance to delve into this, but that's actually one of the areas, Sarah, that I had actually pinpointed as well. In terms of thinking about, first of all, as a starting point for this goal, thinking about building alliances within the faculty as we're moving forward with this goal is going to be, I think, a very important consideration for the leadership team. And then also thinking about building alliances within the partnerships, leveraging alliances across the partnerships, and from there even branching out into the communities. So that will also be something that I will note for further follow-up for future meetings. That's an excellent point. Anyone else? So in moving on in looking at thinking about Hansel also impacting partnerships, there is also a free access resource by the Tennessee Leaders for Equity, and they have developed a playbook that has identified specific equity commitments. And within this, there are specific plans and outlines and considerations for these. And in looking through these equity commitments, one of the questions that I have for you for the leadership team is looking at this list and thinking about what you have currently in your existing partnerships. In what ways could Hansel collaborate with district partnerships within these equity commitments? What possibilities do you see here in alignment with this goal that we're focusing on?
Definitely number 5, I can see the first part, recruiting a diverse teaching force. We could definitely partner with the school district with that piece. And then also number 7, partnering with community allies. I think that's another way to really build relationships with the community, between the community and the universities, working with the district on partnering with community allies.
Yeah, I even think, just to add on to, I agree with what Deidre said, and just even thinking about when we're thinking about integrating this into our teacher prep curriculum, I think it's really important that we might even use some of the district data around, especially I would say number 1 and 2 and 3. So how we're thinking about just educating our teacher candidates on our partners and current data that they're seeing, and kind of unpacking why those data are happening, and link that to some of our historical perspectives, et cetera. So I definitely think using kind of, hot off the press data related to this work. I'll stop there.
That's excellent. Again, I'm taking great notes on all these great ideas from the leadership team, and we'll be following up with all of these. The next piece that I think warrants significant consideration is ways in which Hansel University could be a driving force in diversifying the teacher workforce. Because the reality is, by 2024, students of color are predicted to make up 55% of the public school population, and diversifying the teaching profession is needed to disrupt our educational inequities. So some examples that we have that I will also be following up and sharing resources with you on are Pathways to Teaching. And Pathways to Teaching is a concurrent enrollment program that's been designed for 11th and 12th grade students to explore teaching as a potential career choice, while at the same time examining critical issues related to educational justice and earning college credit. So these are some very thoughtful questions that I'd like to open up here to think about, that Pathways to Teaching uses as part of their guiding practices. How can we create a culturally diverse teacher workforce in our school district? How can we better prepare our high school students from low-income communities and first-generation students to be college ready? And how can we offer concurrent enrollment courses for students who don't qualify based on the current system because of low GPA? So when we're thinking about disparities in opportunities, these are some very significant questions and for consideration. And Pathways to Teaching currently right now is in the Denver metro area, and they've also expanded out into the Eastern Oregon area. But I think there's some significant factors here that warrant consideration with the work that we'll be working on together over the next year with Hansel. I'd like your feedback on these questions in this program.
Well, I think, Valerie, before I give feedback, I think I have a question for you. So
Yes.
As I'm looking at these questions, and because these are areas that we really need to strengthen, do you know of any universities that are currently doing this work that you can refer us to, or you can support us with? Because I think, because these are areas that we're struggling with, I don't know if we can really answer these questions right now. We'll need more support from you. So I was wondering if you know of any universities that are currently using Pathways to Teaching.
Deidre, at this time I do not. But I will look into that, and that will also be something that I'll be following up in our next meeting so that we will have more specific information for a game plan for coming up with strategies for strengthening in this area.
Yeah, I think I agree with Deidre and Valerie. The slide, this is a real need for us. We actually don't have really clear recruitment plans in place with our district partners, and we're at a place where our partnerships, I think, are strong enough that we should be thinking about this work together. And so I think this in particular is an important goal for us. It's what we're working on with you all, but we haven't started yet. So any resources or connections you can help us make to help put this work in place would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. The next thing that I wanted to bring up as another resource for diversifying the teacher workforce is an organization that's been put together called the Fellowship, Black Male Educators for Social Justice, because the reality is less than 2% of teachers nationwide are Black men. This has originated in Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia, this number is only marginally better. As you can see here on the screen, only 4% of teachers in the Philadelphia area are Black men, but in a district with a student body that is over 50% Black, and 27% of those are Black males. This is a significant thing for us to think about in terms of the underrepresentation of Black men in the teacher corps, how that not only affects students of color, but all students who enter the classroom, because we are all profoundly impacted, and our capacity for equity, our understanding of tolerance is increased by having models and examples and diversity in the teaching force, as well as just something that we talk about within our curriculum.
Yeah, we sent US Prep paid for quite a few people, our faculty and then students last year to a Black Male Educators Conference. It's the same group, and they came back, and it really raised awareness, I think, around this issue that we really don't talk about. So
yes.
Definitely important. I'm wondering too if how we might connect better with them to think about, like, what do we do to address this?
I'm really excited to hear that, and I'm not surprised. I think it's absolutely remarkable, and also looking at the way that they're reaching out to mentor high school students. It's a very exciting thing to see, and this would be something that could be sequenced in with the support and services plan and for further development. So let's talk about next steps. In looking at the time frame that we have left for our session today, and looking at the goal implementation of our goal for today that we're focusing on for increasing principles, promoting principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice through coursework, clinical experiences, and partnerships. Starting in fall of 2019, this goal implementation would start out with the initial faculty survey, with faculty training on the goal, and then with time for faculty to be planning out course revisions, and continuing on in the fall with a partnership governance meeting to be able to share out with the district partners what has been happening at Hansel University with the faculty training and planning for course integration, and to open up the discussion with the partners to identify potential professional development needs for their teacher educators in the district. So we're also at the same time building that capacity within the partnerships. And again, as you had mentioned earlier, Sarah, that data piece with the districts would also be important for consideration at that time. Following into the spring 2020 semester, there would be an opportunity for a faculty meeting analysis of teacher candidate feedback on coursework revisions, as well as an analysis of program data following that program integrity and desired outcomes. And then faculty goal setting for continuous improvement through this. Towards the end of the spring semester of 2020, there would be a post survey to compare the difference through this first year of implementation of the initial faculty survey towards the end, and then ending with always going in a cycle of continuous improvement, continued faculty goal setting.
This is actually a great visual, and I appreciate kind of the high level scope and sequence of this work. In terms of the initial faculty survey, is that assessing, like, are we doing our own perceptions of our university culture related to this work, or what is that?
Yes, this needs to start with being, first of all, a self-assessment of the faculty perceptions. And that is something that we could work on together with the leadership team, because in moving forward with this work and with the course revisions, it would be important, again, to start with our own self-awareness.
And so it's like a perception of our environment and our culture, or is it a self-assessment of ourselves related to our own biases? And
it would actually be a combination of our own bias, because we all have to be aware that we all do have our own bias, but also assessing what the current culture is within the faculty.
Great.
Any other questions? I am going to be following up with next steps that I'll be sending out an email to all of you with the notes, the suggestions, the questions that you've asked me, as well as the additional resources. And once you receive all of that, we will be in contact again to make arrangements for our next meeting.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful. I'm excited about this work, and I'm hopeful. I think it's really needed. These are kind of, conversations that don't, in my experience in higher ed as a tenured faculty who's been here for 25 years, we've never engaged in this. So I do anticipate it's going to be a little bit different for us. And so I know that it's needed. And I know ultimately it will impact how we're preparing our teacher candidates too. So this was really helpful, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it.
Thank you, and we look forward to working with you, Valerie. So we appreciate the work that you put into setting some goals, helping us set some goals. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, ladies, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, Valerie, thank you so much. Would you be able to send us your presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'll send you my follow-up notes, just like the real deal.
Awesome. And I didn't know if you knew, but Nicole joined us on the phone, so she's.
I figured that was her. I saw that. Yes.
Hi,
All right.
Valerie. I'm sorry I had to join so late. It's a little
No
crazy
worries.
here in El Paso today.
No worries. Oh my
Thank you
goodness.
so much.
You're very welcome. Take care.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Val.